Hi everybody, in today's video I'm going to show you how to make a sliding waterfall just like this. Now this piece here that I have created is on an 8x8 paper with 6x4 photos, but you can make this other sizes. So you can do this for 3x4 photos, 3x3, 4x4, you get the idea. It doesn't matter what size your page is, you can make this work for lots of different page sizes. So stay tuned and join me for the tutorial. The first thing that we will need is our scoring board and scoring tool. And then we need to know what size our page is going to be. So for the sake of this demonstration, I have my page cut to 8x8. Depending on the size of your page, that will determine how many waterfall flaps you can put on your page or what size you're going to be using. Now I have my pieces cut already. I'm going to be using 6 1/4 by 4 1/4 pieces. That way a typical 4x6 photo will fit right on my pieces. You could do this with 4x4 size. You could do this with 3x4 size. Really, it just depends on what's going to fit best on your paper. Now, depending on the size of your flaps and the size of your paper, you have to figure out how many flaps are going to fit. So with mine, I'm going to leave a 1/2 inch space between my waterfall flaps, which is pretty common. So you will see that these are going to have a 1/2 inch between each of these here. Now that's important because you're going to be adding that 1/2 inch to the size of your actual piece to determine if it will fit on your paper. What I mean by that, I have my flaps here. I'm going to be placing it in the landscape orientation. So I have 4 1/4 inches here for the flap. And then for each of those, I need to add a 1/2 inch. So I have 6 flaps here I know are going to fit on my page. If I have 6 flaps, I need to accommodate for 3 extra inches. So 4 1/4 plus 3 is 7 1/4. So when this is on my page, it will give me enough room and I'll have a little bit left over here that you'll be able to see the place for the pull, which is important too. If you have smaller flaps, let's say you were doing 3x4 size flaps here and you had your 3 1/4 inch here, you would be able to put more pieces down your paper because you would have smaller flaps to space them. So that's really important to think about when you're making your waterfall, is the size of your page and the size of your flaps. If you were following along with me on this size, with my 8x8 size paper, I have my 6 1/4 by 4 1/4 pieces here. And I'm going to set both of these aside for now. The next piece that I have is cut to 6 1/4 by 11 inches. I'm going to leave it at 11 inches for now, and we will actually be cutting this later. Now on my 11-inch side, I am going to be scoring this. I need to have 6 1/2 inch score lines for my 6 flaps. So just starting at the 1/2 inch, I'm going to score at 1/2, at 1, 1 1/2, 2, 2 1/2, and 3. So now I've got room for all of my 6 flaps to attach to this. If you had more because you are using smaller pieces, you would continue to score this to accommodate each of those flaps. The width of this piece is also going to be the width of your photo mats. So if I had 3 1/4 by 4 1/4 photo mats, if it was 4 1/4 by 3 1/4 as a landscape like this, then this would be 4 1/4. If it was set up like this for portrait and it was 3 1/4 by 4 1/4, then this would be 3 1/4. So this piece here gets to be cut the exact same size as your flap in whichever orientation it's going to go. Next, I have a piece that measures 7 1/2 by 3 inches. Now this piece, the size of it depends on the size of this. My piece here is 6 1/4, so I need this to be a little bit larger to accommodate for that. And I'm actually going to leave gaps so that my waterfall slides a little bit more. You don't have to do this, but I like to leave a 1/8 inch gap to raise this piece up. That way these slide more, and whenever I decorate my waterfalls, I don't worry about them catching. So this piece I've cut to 1 1/4 inches longer than this piece here. This is 6 1/4, this is 7 1/2. So it just depends on your measurements. Again, you don't have to do this. You don't have to leave that 1/8 inch gap if you just want it to be flat for your waterfall to flip under. You can just leave a 1/2 inch on either side. On this piece here, I'm going to put the 7 1/2 inch side in my scoreboard. I'm going to score this at 1/2 inch and 5/8 of an inch. And then I'm going to score this at 7 6 7/8. So now I have this piece. I'm going to fold on these score lines. In these 1/8 inch pieces here, it's got to be like this. When this is put down, this piece will be sliding through there. So you need to make sure that this piece will fit before you go any further. Once I have my pieces cut, I'm going to bring the one in with all of these score lines, and I'm going to just go ahead and fold and burnish on each of my score lines. I'm going to bring the base page back in, and I have this mechanism now. If you see here, if I put this on the page, it does hang over just a little bit. I'm guessing my 11 inch piece of paper was actually a little bit more than 11, so it's probably actually the same size. But what I'm going to end up doing is eventually cutting this. And I like to use sometimes decorative edge dies, but you can also cut this straight. We will do that later though, so you don't have to worry about it now. Just making sure though that it is long enough so that you do have a pull tab. And if it's not long enough, then you would need to add another piece of paper, so you'd have to piece this together. We're going to start adhering our flaps down to the waterfall. So I've got my flaps here and I've got my piece. So you can do this one of two ways. You can flip so only one is showing this way, or you can flip them all down so you only see this one here. I'm going to be starting by adding my adhesive to this first piece. I don't want to go over this score line because that is going to be folding and you won't actually have a flap on that. So you have to be really careful here. You don't want to add too much adhesive to where you start to see warping in your paper, but you want to make sure you have enough so that your flap is adhered down well. Once the adhesive is on, I'm going to take my first piece and I am going to use that score line to line up my piece. I do not want to go over that score line. I want to actually still be able to see that score line right above that piece. And then I'm going to adhere this down and burnish it with my bone folder so that it stays on. So now we have our first waterfall flap. We can go ahead and do this for the next piece. So we're going to fold the next 1/2 inch section, and now we're going to apply our adhesive here to this second 1/2 inch section, making sure that we are not adhering it down to the score lines at all. And then once we have the adhesive on, we're going to take this one and same thing. We want to make sure that we're not over that score line. And we want to make sure the sides are lined up nice and straight, and then burnish down. Now I'm going to bring up the next piece that has the 1/2 inch section, and I'm going to apply my adhesive between those score lines. And then I'll take my next flap here, lining up the top so I can still see that score line, and then lining up those sides and burnishing this one down. Flip to the 4th 1/2 inch section and add my adhesive here. Taking my 4th flap or panel, I'm going to add it to that 1/2 inch section, making sure not to go over that top, and then burnishing this down. Next, I'm going to expose that 5th 1/2 inch section and apply my adhesive here. And taking that next panel, I will place that at the top, making sure again that I can still see that score line, line up my sides, and burnish down. And then we have our final 1/2 inch section. We will apply the adhesive to that section. And then we're going to take our final panel, making sure it's just slightly below that score line. The sides are lined up, and then I will burnish this down. Once your flaps are on, you can go ahead and work the mechanism to make sure that each of these will flip smoothly. Now that is the reason that we don't go above the score line, because if you do, these will not flip smoothly. They will start to hit each other and it will not work very well. Once I have my flaps on, I've got my piece here. And if you see, this goes all the way to the bottom of the page. I don't need it to go to the bottom of the page, so I am going to be cutting this off. Now, I don't want to cut it too short because I need to be able to pull this. This piece is going to be tucked up under here. So I need to make sure that I can pull this out. I am just going to cut off maybe 1/4 of an inch from my piece so that it will be just slightly smaller than the page itself. I decided to go ahead and cut off 1/2 inch. So if this is all the way at the top, I've got 1/2 inch here. So my 7.5 inch mechanism for my 8 inch page. It's really just a personal preference to you of what you like the look of. And same goes with where you put this on the page. You can have this start at the top so that it is even, or it can be slightly down a little bit so that these pages will flip onto that. It doesn't matter truly where you put it. Now I am going to be putting this piece around this bottom part here. So taking this and putting it inside of here like this. And I'm just going to first place my piece on my page, and then I will scoot this down in just a minute. So I am going to put mine on my page here, and I'm going to leave about 1/8 of an inch at the top and more down here at the bottom. Once you have this, if you want to add a decorative paper onto your album now, you could do so. You could always add decorative strips down the side, but if you want to completely cover that, you would do it before you put the mechanism down. I'm going to lift these flaps up but hold the bottom piece down, and I'm going to move this piece down until it is a little tiny bit, about 1/8 of an inch, and I will show you where it is in just a second because I know it's hard to see at this camera angle. About 1/8 of an inch above this flap. The ruler, if you see this, my piece, the little pocket, is sitting on the edge of the ruler. So it is just about 1/8 of an inch up above the bottom edge of this first piece. And here, I'm just going to place my ruler there, and I'm just going to draw some marks here where this is going to go. So now if I take this off, this piece is going to sit right here, and I'm going to make sure that it is centered on my piece, and it actually was where I had it marked. So once I have those marks, I'm going to apply my adhesive to these 1/2 inch tabs only, not this 1/8 inch section, and I'm going to adhere this down. Now once I have this on the page, I'm going to hold this in place and very carefully burnish inside of here on both sides, because I need this piece to stay in that position, but it needs to be burnished down. So very carefully make sure that you have this burnished. And once you have that piece on, just go ahead and take your mechanism and make sure that it still fits and slides in here. If it does not, because you've put these too far in, you need to take it off, and you need to make sure that these are straight so that your piece will slide. Now, once that is on the page, we're going to put the mechanism down inside of it. We're going to position it where we want it to go. So I think actually I'm going to just make it even. So there is about 1/4 of an inch on top and bottom. Then I'm going to lift up on all these flaps, keeping those flaps and keeping everything in the right position. I'm going to apply a line of adhesive across the top and then close those flaps. So I am adhering the very last flap to that mechanism. And then I'm going to allow this to dry for a minute before I move it at all. Once it's dry, if I start to pull my flaps, I will see they will all flip as I'm pulling. With my last flap open, I like to just come in here and burnish this just to make sure that it is stuck on really well. Now, if this piece was taller and it was all the way up here, it would be fine too. This would just be up here a little bit further instead of down here at the bottom. Hopefully that'll make sense. One of the other things I've done in some of my times that I've used this, I've made this larger so I could have a pocket. And so if this was larger, then I would have applied adhesive across, you know, the bottom and one of the edges and made a pocket over here. Now this one's pretty small, so I'm not going to do that. And you can actually adhere this whole entire thing down if you want to. It won't hurt anything to add adhesive to that so that this whole entire piece is stuck down. And there is your sliding waterfall. You could use a decorative edge die down here on this piece. Obviously, before you put it on the page, you would just go ahead and run this through your die cutting machine. You could add a ribbon as like a pull tab here, and you can decorate that however you choose. Now, when you add your decorations, because I have this little tiny 1/8 inch gap, it gives me a little bit more space here, so that when I'm flipping these down, you'll see that they're going into that gap, and the paper has enough room, but my embellishments too, if I have small embellishments on here, they will actually go through there too. So you can use thin chipboard pieces, you can use stickers. I've put very thin pearls on here before. I've had lace pieces on here, not super bulky lace, but flat lace. So you can add some embellishment to your flaps if you need to or want to, and it will still accommodate that given that 1/8 inch little gap here. If you don't do that and you just put that piece flat, it's a little bit harder to get those flaps to go through. One other thing to think about with this technique, it does not have to always be in this orientation here. This could be on a page sideways as well. So you could do this and have your pages and your waterfall flaps flip side to side. So this technique really can be a really cute way to add some interactive features to your album. If you have any questions about this technique, feel free to leave me a comment below, and I would love to know your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.